The wild part is she didn't even steal my electricity like a villain. She borrowed it, politely, every night, and then acted like I was the problem when I asked her to stop. 5 months of borrowing. By the way, long enough for my power bill to start looking like a ransom note. And the whole thing started with a bright orange extension cord stretched across desert dirt like a neon middle finger. My name's Cole Bennett, I'm 43, and I run a small diesel repair shop on 7 dusty acres just outside Silver Ridge, New Mexico. One of those places where the road goes asphalt to gravel to good luck. And your neighbors are either the kind who wave with 2 fingers off the steering wheel, or the kind who pretend you're part of the scenery. This land used to be one big ranch back in the 70s before it got chopped up and parceled out, and now there's this shared driveway cutting through the middle like a zipper that never fully closed, my house and shop on the left, her place on the right, and between us a humming transformer box that looked harmless until it basically became the main character. My side smells like diesel, hot metal, and coffee that's been sitting on the burner, so long it's basically punishment. Cinder block walls, corrugated steel roof, oil stains older than some of the guys I hire when work gets heavy. I drive a beat-up Ram 3500 with faded paint and a tailgate dent I earned by backing into my own fence like a genius. My landscaping is kicking tumbleweeds away from the bay doors and calling it a day. Her side? Her side looked like a magazine spread got lost and landed in the desert by mistake. Clean white exterior, black trim, windows so tall they could catch a sunset and sell it back to you. Decorative gravel laid out in neat little patterns like somebody took a ruler to the dirt. A plunge pool that glowed blue at night. And in the garage, a charcoal gray Tesla Model X that always looked freshly detailed, like it had its own skincare routine. Her name was Madison Clark, 38, former marketing exec from Seattle, moved down here for what she called a reset. She ran some online wellness brand and did private breathwork sessions for people who had more money than direction. First week she moved in, she shows up at my shop gate with gluten-free banana bread and this bright smile and says, "We're going to love the quiet out here." I remember thinking you won't last one summer. To be fair, we were cordial at first. She waved, I nodded, we shared the same mailbox cluster out by the road, the same stretch of gravel driveway, the same desert wind that tries to sandblast your face off in March. And that transformer box between our properties, just sitting there humming like it had secrets, felt like background noise, like one of those things you never think about until it starts costing you money. It was late March when I noticed the cord. I'd been replacing injectors on a farm truck, stepped outside to stretch my back, wind kicking up dust, and there it was, bright orange, industrial gauge, running from the exterior outlet on the side of my shop fence, snaking low across the ground, disappearing under the corner of her garage door. I just stood there for a second, blinking at it like, is this real? Is this a prank? Is this how people from Seattle say hello? I walked over, unplugged it, and held the end in my hand, warm. Not the sun touched it warm, but this has been doing work warm. That night I checked my electric bill, and it had jumped $238 compared to the same month the year before. I told myself it had to be the shop, compressor running more, welder, whatever. But the next month it was up again, and the next, and by the time I stopped pretending I was imagining things, we were looking at roughly $1,200 over 5 months. And listen, I'm not some millionaire hoarding electricity like it's gold bars. Diesel repair is honest work, but margins are tight, and $1,200 is not oops. $1,200 is somebody's paying for somebody. The first time I unplugged it, I taped a note right to the cord, simple, plain, not mean. Please do not use my outlet. Call me if you need to discuss utilities. Next morning, the cord's plugged back in, and there's this laminated card sitting on my workbench like a centerpiece. I still don't know how she got inside my shop gate, but there it was, glossy and smug, and it said, "It's just electricity, Cole. Let's not make this weird. Just electricity." I actually laughed when I read it, not because it was funny, but because it was so casually dismissive. Just electricity is what you say when you're not the one paying for it. So that evening I walked over while she was wiping down the Tesla like she was polishing a trophy. "Hey," I said, keeping my voice even, "you're pulling power from my outlet." She smiled in this way that technically counted as a smile but didn't reach her eyes. The contractor told me the outdoor line was part of the shared easement. "It's not," I said. "It runs off my panel." She leans back against the Tesla, totally relaxed, like I'm asking her to turn down music at a barbecue. "It's temporary. I'm waiting on the utility to upgrade my service." This is rural, things move slow. And then she hits me with it. This little shrug, this little look over my shop like it's a prop set. You've got plenty of capacity. It's not like you're hurting. That line sat in my chest like a rock. Because it wasn't about money anymore, not really. It was about the quiet math in her head that decided what I could afford to lose. Like my life was simpler, smaller, less important, so my boundaries must be flexible. For a couple weeks I went back and forth in my own head, because I'm not a confrontational guy. I fix engines. Mechanical problems make sense. Bad injector, clogged fuel line, broken belt. You diagnose it, you solve it. People problems are messier. Part of me wondered if I was being stubborn, if maybe this was the price of living next to someone from a different world. But every time I saw that cord glowing faint under her garage light at night, I felt this tightness in my chest, like my own house was being treated like a convenience store that never closed. So one Saturday, I drove into town and pulled the original property file from the county clerk's office. Old land division documents from 1978, scanned, yellowed at the edges, the kind of paperwork that smells like dust and forgotten arguments. And that's when the story flipped. Because Madison wasn't just borrowing electricity, she was depending on me entirely. Turns out the transformer box servicing both houses was deeded to my parcel. The primary account holder with the rural co-op was me. Her house connected through a distribution line that crossed the shared easement, but tied into my infrastructure before it ever reached the road. In plain English, her lights turned on because my name was on the paperwork. I sat in my truck in the courthouse parking lot reading it twice, then a third time letting it sink in. And weirdly, it didn't make me feel powerful. It made me feel responsible, and responsibility cuts both ways. On the drive home, dust trailing behind my truck like a low cloud, I kept thinking about something my dad used to say when I was a kid working beside him in his machine shop in Amarillo. If it runs through your hands, it runs through your name. Back then he meant workmanship, reputation. But now I realize something else ran through my name. Her air conditioning in August, her glossy little pool lights, and that Tesla charger humming at 48 amps every night like it owned the desert. I didn't want a screaming match. I wanted fairness. And fairness sometimes needs leverage, and leverage means understanding the system better than the person trying to use it. So instead of marching over their waving paperwork like some kind of angry librarian, I did what I know, hardware. Monday morning I closed the shop early and drove to the electrical supply warehouse in town. Smelled like copper, dust, burnt coffee, and arguments. The guy behind the counter, Luis, has known me for years. He restores old Chevys on the weekends, always has grease under his fingernails even when he's wearing a clean shirt. He looks at the parts one put on the counter and goes, "What are you building?" "Not building," I said. "Managing load. I bought a heavy-duty contactor relay rated for industrial use, a current sensor that could handle 50 amps continuous, and a meter lock kit. Nothing destructive, nothing illegal, nothing that would fry her system. Just control." The plan was simple. If her charging load exceeded a certain threshold, the system would open the circuit temporarily. 10 seconds off, then reset, repeat as needed. Not cutting her off completely, not turning her house into a blackout horror movie, just making the Tesla charge irritating. Because inconvenience gets attention without creating chaos. Back at the shop I shut down my panel, double-checked every line, installed the current sensor on the branch feeding her side of the easement connection, wired the contactor in line, and set the trigger at 30 amps. Her charger pulled 48. That night I sat in my office with the lights off, window cracked, desert air sliding in, quiet so thick you could hear your own thoughts trying to start a fight. And around 9:17 p.m., click. 10 seconds of silence, click again. From across the property, through the still air, I could hear it. Her charger cycling, stopping, restarting, like a confused robot trying to do its job. I didn't grin like a cartoon villain, but I did lean back and let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding for 5 months. Day 1, nothing. No knocking, no texts, just the little on-off rhythm in the distance. Day 2, the show started. I was under the hood of a backhoe when I heard her garage door open and close 3 times in under 5 minutes, like she was trying to intimidate the charger with dramatic entrances. I wiped my hands and stepped outside casually, like I just happened to be alive and observant. She's standing there in expensive athleisure, hair tied back, phone in hand, staring at the charger like it had personally betrayed her. Unplug, plug back in blue ring light, click silence. Again. Click. Silence. You could almost see the notifications stacking up. Charging interrupted, charging interrupted, charging interrupted. That night around 10 p.m., my phone buzzed, unknown number. Cole, something's wrong with the power. My charger keeps shutting off. I waited a minute before replying, because I'm not proud, but I'm also not above letting someone simmer in their own entitlement for 60 seconds. Panels reading normal on my end. I texted back. Has to be on your side. This never happened before. That's interesting, I wrote back. No emoji. No explanation. Day 3, she walked over in broad daylight. No banana bread, no sweet smile. Yoga mat tucked under her arm like she might downward dog her way through conflict, sunglasses pushed up on her head. Are you messing with the power? She asked, skipping hello. I set down the socket wrench I was cleaning, took a rag to my hands slow, like I had all the time in the world. Am I managing my electrical load? I said. Yes. Her jaw tightened. You can't just sabotage my house because you're annoyed. I'm not sabotaging anything, I said calm. Your house has access to power within the terms of the easement. This is retaliation. No, I said. This is control. She takes a step closer. I have clients. I have calls. My vehicle needs to charge. And I have bills, I said. 5 months' worth. She scoffed. We discussed that. No, I said, you dismissed it. There's a difference. Then I walked into my office and came back with a manila envelope I'd prepared the night before. Because if I've learned anything fixing engines, it's that you don't walk into a problem without your tools. Inside was an itemized breakdown, 5 months of increased usage calculated against prior year averages. Total, $1,184.73. Then a second line item referencing misuse of infrastructure under Clause 14, subsection C of the original shared easement agreement, penalty assessed, $1,800. And attached to it a new drafted utility management agreement. From that point forward, cost sharing 60/40ths. She covers 60% of infrastructure maintenance and upgrades. I remain the primary account holder, final approval authority on high-load installations. Violations result in a 72-hour disconnect notice. Term length, 15 years. She flips through the pages fast at first, then slower, and I watched the color drain from her face in stages, like someone slowly dimming a light. You're joking, she said. I'm not. I'll get a lawyer. You should, I said. Bring them the deed copy. Bring them the co-op account statement. Bring them the transformer ownership record. The silence between us got loud. Desert wind picked up and rattled a loose piece of tin on my tool shed roof like the world was adding percussion. Then she tried a softer voice. Cole, this is extreme. And that's when the anger finally burned clean into something colder. No, I said quietly. 5 months was extreme. There's a moment in any confrontation where both people realize the ground moved underneath them. I saw it behind her eyes. She'd assumed I'd either roll over or explode. I did neither. I just shifted the system. She left without another word. That night the Tesla charger did its little 10-second dance again like clockwork. Click silence, click silence. 3 days later, a certified envelope showed up. Not from a lawyer, from her. Inside was a cashier's check for $2,984.73. Full back payment plus the penalty, rounded up, and the agreement signed, notarized. I stood there in my shop holding that paper, and what I felt wasn't triumph, it was relief. Because this was never about humiliating her. It was about boundaries, about the invisible lines people think they can step over when they decide your work, your life, your name, are just background elements in their convenience. After that, things got quiet. Her charger ran normally within the updated load parameters we'd agreed on. She paid her share. We went back to nodding when we passed on the driveway, but something had changed. The balance wasn't assumed anymore. 6 months later, I watched a solar crew unload panels onto her roof, 30 grand of glossy independence catching desert sun like it was collecting receipts. For 3 straight days, trucks lined the gravel, guys in harnesses moving like careful ants, bolting down black rectangles that threw back light sharp enough to squint at. Madison didn't look at my side once during the install. Not when they tied into her system. Not when the inspector came. Not when they flipped the switch and her house went from co-op dependent to partially self-powered. That night her place hummed differently. Softer, steadier, or maybe that was just my brain finally unclenching. I expected her to be smug about it, to make some comment about sustainability or not burdening me anymore. She didn't. A week later, She walked over with a six-pack of something local and overpriced, and stood at the edge of my open bay door like she was stepping into a different country. "You busy?" she asked. "Always," I said, but I waved her in anyway. She looked around like she'd never really seen the shop before. The weld marks on the floor, the old calendar with a tractor on it, my dad's photo above the workbench, oil-smudged and proud. "I didn't realize your dad ran a place like this," she said, nodding at the picture. "Ran one better," I said. She sets the beer down on a crate and just stands there, like she's practicing how to be human again. "I wanted to say something," she finally says. I leaned against the bench and waited. "I shouldn't have assumed," she said. "About the electricity about you." There it was, quiet, not dramatic, not some movie apology with swelling strings. Just a small truth finally spoken out loud. I shrugged. "You did." She let out this little laugh, the kind people use when they're admitting something uncomfortable. "Where I used to live," she said, "if you plugged into a shared line, nobody noticed or they just Venmo'd each other and moved on." "This isn't Seattle," I said. "No," she said, softer. "It's not." We stood there a minute in the smell of oil and hot metal, desert heat drifting through the open bay door. "I really did think you were being petty," she added. "I didn't understand how the infrastructure worked." "That's the thing," I said. "Most people don't. They see a switch and think it's magic. And here's the part that surprised me. After all that friction, we didn't become enemies. Not friends exactly, but something like mutual respect carved out of a hard lesson." She started texting before scheduling contractors, adding a heat pump, load won't exceed threshold, stuff like that. I'd reply with a thumbs up or a quick note about amperage. Once, during a monsoon storm, her inverter tripped and half her house went dark. She showed up at my door soaked, not demanding, just asking, "Can you take a look?" So I grabbed a flashlight and followed her across the mud. In her garage, water dripping off the roof edge, I reset the breaker feeding her backup battery, and when the lights flicked back on, she let out a breath and said, "Thank you." Simple. No edge. Later that night, sitting alone in my kitchen, I thought about that first orange cord, how fast I took it personally, how fast she dismissed it. We were both reacting to stories in our heads. In hers, I was the grumpy rural mechanic hoarding resources. In mine, she was the entitled transplant siphoning off what she hadn't built. Neither story was totally fair, but the lesson still stands, and it's a bitter one people don't like hearing. Power is never just electricity. Power is leverage. Power is paperwork. Power is who's responsible when something burns out, who gets stuck holding the bill, who gets ignored because they seem fine. And the part people argue about, at barbecues, at the feed store like it's local folklore, is whether I went too far. Some say I should have sued. Some say I should have shut her off completely. Some say I should have eaten the cost to keep peace. Others say I waited too long. But what most folks miss is it wasn't really about $1,200. It was about the assumption that my labor and my infrastructure were just available, like they belonged to the air. When you grow up fixing things with your hands, you understand something fundamental. Nothing runs by accident. Power lines, water pipes, engines, relationships, they all depend on somebody maintaining them. And if that somebody is you, then you have every right to define the terms, kindly, calmly, but clearly. A few weeks ago, almost a year after the whole mess started, I came home late and noticed something that made me laugh under my breath. No orange glow from her garage, no extension cord, no cycling hum, just quiet. Her solar panels caught the last light of sunset and turned this deep purple against the sky, like the desert itself was signing off on the deal. And I realized I didn't miss the conflict, not even a little. What I keep instead is the truth I learned the hard way. Being kind doesn't mean being a doormat, and enforcing a boundary doesn't require screaming. Sometimes the cleanest justice isn't dramatic, it's a system that makes somebody finally pay attention. So here's what I want to know. Was I justified installing that load control setup, or did I escalate something that could have been solved with a handshake? And where's the line between petty and principled when someone's taking what's yours and calling it no big deal? Tell me what you would have done. Cut her off entirely, take her to court, or do exactly what I did. And if you've ever had a neighbor, a coworker, or even a family member treat your time, your money, or your boundaries like they were communal property, drop that story too, because I swear, the comments always end up splitting right down the middle, and I'm genuinely curious where you land on this whole thing.